Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports, and we have a brand new 2023 NBA mock draft to deliver here on the channel. But I thought, let's do something really fun with this one. We're in the back end of January, mock draft season, kind of getting a little weird right now. A lot of crazy good college basketball games going on. So I wanted to get a little funky ourselves with a 2023 NBA mock draft with a simulated lottery. So it's going to be a lot of fun to actually look at here. So let's jump into it and let's simulate the lottery. We are using tankathon.com to sim this lottery. You can see the Rockets have the #1 odds with Detroit and Charlotte for that first overall pick, 14% chance. Let's go ahead, simulate who will be taking Victor Wembanyama in this mock draft. And it's Detroit. The Pistons move up to #1. San Antonio jumps up to #2. Houston drops down to #3, which is a very interesting spot for them to be in. Orlando moves up to 4, and Charlotte in turn falls down to #5. So the rest of the order kind of stays somewhat, original for what the standings are looking like right now. Interestingly, Washington, Toronto, the Pelicans here at 8. We'll have Portland at 9, who've kind of fallen down more recently. Orlando with their second top 10 pick. They have one at 4 and 10 now, as they were one of the teams that won in the lottery. Oklahoma City, Indiana, Phoenix, and Utah. If you guys are curious how the NBA draft lottery works, I do have a video up on the channel with the 2022 NBA draft odds explaining exactly how the NBA draft lottery works. It's a really good video. I'd go check that out after this mock draft is done. But now let's actually jump into the selections here in this mock draft. All right, here we are now. Pick #1, the Detroit Pistons on the board. And as I alluded to in the actual lottery simulation, the first overall pick is going to be Victor Wembanyama. There's no questions asked about that. And I think Detroit's one of those best landing spots, best potential scenarios for Victor Wembanyama as well. When you look at what this team currently has, I know this team's not winning a lot of games right now, but you consider the fact that, they did draft Jaden Ivey last year, who I was really high on. They drafted Jalen Duren, who I also really, really liked, and I think is turning into one of the best young defensive chess pieces in the NBA. He's able to do a lot of different things. He's a very versatile defensive center. They still have Bojan Bogdanovic at the time I'm recording this. Obviously, Victor Wembanyama coming into the fold would maybe want to make you keep him, but it's still possible that maybe they'll explore trade options for him, have extra assets available to make other moves. And I think one thing that's really underrated about this, they have Cade Cunningham, who hasn't even really been playing this year because of a serious shin injury that has been, plaguing him for quite some time. Actually, he even said that his final year at Montverde was impacted a little bit by that shin. Obviously, somewhat of a red flag given the fact that he's been playing on that for quite some time, and that it's been a nagging, lasting injury. Of course, underwent season-ending surgery for that injury. So Detroit, if they come back next year healthy with a Cade Cunningham and now more experienced Jaden Ivey and some good other young players on that team, obviously there's questions about Sadiq Bey's long-term role here in Detroit, but this is probably best case scenario for not only Detroit, but possibly for Victor Wembanyama. Probably see a starting lineup next year that includes at least the 4 of the following in Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, Victor Wembanyama, Jalen Duren. That's a really, really strong, formidable group for sure, and one that I think could probably become a contender in the East within the next 2-3 seasons. And that's how much of an impact Wembanyama is going to have, assuming he stays healthy, which I believe he will, especially if he's playing the 4 next to Jalen Duren. I think that's going to help limit some of the potential injury concerns that people see for Victor Wembanyama, which I am less concerned about myself. Pick #2 here, San Antonio on the clock now. And Pistons fans, maybe you guys aren't going to like this, what I'm about to say, but honestly, I think the draft runs through Texas this year. If I had to actually bet money on who's going to be picking first overall, it would be San Antonio. If you look at the history of Adam Silver's time as commissioner of the NBA, the small market teams are the ones who receive the best benefits from the lottery. And not that San Antonio doesn't have a big fan base, I really think they do, but San Antonio is not in LA, or it's not, Boston, New York, that kind of market. San Antonio to me is probably going to have the #1 overall pick, but in this situation where they don't, #2 is still not a bad option for them. They draft Scoot Henderson, the obvious and apparent #2 overall draft pick in this year's draft. Right now, if you ask me the top 2 tiers when it comes to draft prospects this year, there's a clear tier number 1, which is Victor Wembanyama all by himself. And then there's a clear tier number 2 where Scoot Henderson is that second guy. And in most years, that tier 2 would be good enough to be a tier 1, 1A, one player, right? The guy who goes first overall. And I think Scoot Henderson, his ability got summed up best by Victor Wembanyama months ago when he said in a short interview, little question about Scoot Henderson, he says, "Oh, he's a really good player. He'd be for sure the number 1 overall pick if I was never born." One of the great all-time legendary quotes in NBA basketball history. And I think Scoot Henderson probably felt slighted by that. No questions asked about that. But with some of the time he missed this year from the NBA G League Ignite season, just with that facial fracture, you look at it and you say, okay, if there was any chance that he would be the first overall pick, he would have needed to play, lights out all season long and just showcase that he's so dominant that he can't be passed on. It just couldn't happen this year with the injuries, and I don't think it would have happened anyway. Scoot's a fantastic player, would have been the first overall pick in a ton of drafts recently. This year, though, unfortunately, he goes number 2. But San Antonio, after trading DeJounte Murray less than a year ago, they find their actual long-term franchise point guard, and it's one that you can't be upset about at all. You guys know how much I like Jaden Ivey last year. Jaden Ivey doesn't even scratch the surface compared to Scoot Henderson in terms of actual, talent, skill set, ability to read the floor. Scoot Henderson's a complete prospect, and honestly, he's going to be a lot of fun to watch for whatever team gets him. But I think San Antonio, really fun, good landing spot. Trey Jones has, carved out a nice role too, where I think he'd be a nice backup point guard behind Scoot. You're looking at a really good long-term backcourt that I think the Spurs could plan on building around. Number 3, the Houston Rockets here now. And realistically, Houston, a team that would be so benefited by being in the top 2. Getting Victor Wembanyama gives them probably a real serious defensive identity around both Şengün and Wembanyama, and Wembanyama's strengths probably hide some of Şengün's weaknesses. And second overall, Scoot Henderson would give them a legit viable point guard who doesn't turn the ball over every other possession like it almost seems like Houston does on a regular basis. This is one of the hardest teams to watch right now in the NBA just because there's not a lot of consistency, flow in their offense. And so as someone who watches a lot of Rockets basketball, it's kind of disheartening. It just kind of sometimes feels like Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green are just kind of being told to, go out there, have fun, shoot whatever you feel like. If you're open, chuck it, sure. And they don't really have like a good set offense. Steven Silas is trying to, kind of do some of that Luka Doncic centric style offense that, he was a part of a little bit in Dallas, and he's trying to do some of that stuff. And it doesn't work when Kevin Porter Jr. is your guy. It just doesn't. That, star centric, heliocentric style of offense, it's just not that good unless you have one of those guys. So being 3 here is kind of unfortunate for them. Scoot Henderson could be a real franchise changer for them. But instead, I have them going with Amen Thompson from Overtime Elite. He is still a very, very good prospect and somebody that in a lot of years is going to generate a lot of buzz to potentially becoming maybe the number 2 or, maybe a dark horse number 1 overall pick. Of course, this year there's no buzz about that because it's just not going to happen. There's no point in talking about that. But Amen Thompson still, a sizey point guard with, pretty good playmaking feel, especially off of a live dribble. That's one thing that as a prospect evaluator, you always have to be watching for. How does this kid do not only, passing the basketball into tight windows, but can he do it off of a live dribble? Can he do it on the move? Can he do it with a guy in his face? Can he do it on a back cut? Can he do it, a cross court pass? He's really shown some of that. He's also someone who's a good aerial passer. And what I mean by that, somebody who understands lob threats and is someone who can identify when a guy has, the potential to go up and make a play in the pick and roll above the ground. Somebody who understands as a guard that sometimes the best pass is one up in the air for a big man to go catch. And, it sounds like that would be something that's kind of obvious to a lot of these pro players. If you watch the Minnesota Timberwolves this year, it's been pretty clear that their guards had to really learn how to play with Rudy Gobert. Gobert is already second in Timberwolves history in lob dunks. And the guy ahead of him is Kevin Garnett. And to be honest, by the end of this year, Rudy Gobert has a good chance of passing Garnett in that statistic all time for the Timberwolves, to show you how many times the Timberwolves are looking for Gobert up in the air like that. And Amen Thompson comes in with that skill set. Now in Houston, it's not like he's going to be feeding Şengün a ton, but maybe that gives you, some fun optionality with Jalen Green, Kenyon Martin Jr. They've already got some good vertical aerial threats. So I think Amen Thompson could fit in really well with some of the scorers already on this team. And he gives you some of that size, defensive upside that they're hoping to see, and ball security that I think Houston could really badly need. Amen Thompson's still a good pick for them here, but definitely not the one that they were maybe hoping for third overall. Pick number 4, Orlando on the clock now in the Magic. 2 top 10 picks in this year's draft, obviously, as we talked about. That trade with the Chicago Bulls was so genius for them. And I just want to say, Orlando's in a great spot right now. Probably the best spot they've been in since, making the finals back with Dwight Howard when they overcame the Cleveland Cavaliers just to lose to the Lakers in 5 games in that series. The Magic are in a really strong position with Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero. They have 2 really sizey, athletic, playmaking, floor general, ball handling type wings who can get to the rim, create their own shot. That's really what you want in today's NBA. Orlando already has 2 of them, and they're going to add a fun third one here. Probably the most polarizing prospect in this year's draft, Brandon Miller from Alabama. And you might be saying, whoa, Orlando doesn't need a wing like this. Why would they draft another wing? You can never have too many of them. And when you look at the skill sets that Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner already come into the league with, they're both capable ball handlers. Brandon Miller, probably less so of a ball handler compared to those 2 guys. But as you can tell this year, he's been an elite shot maker. He knocks down a ton of tough shots for Alabama this year. He's had multiple 30-plus point performances. One thing's proven about this kid, just no matter what the coverage looks like, no matter how contested he has a pretty good chance of getting the ball in the rim. And I think for Orlando, if you want to have a lot of fun with this, you add another lengthy, sizey player you have pick 10 to come back with and play with. There's a lot of talent already in Orlando. It's just all young. They all have to grow together. And, I think Jamal Mosley's going to have to figure out how all these pieces work. But at the end of the day, with the way the league's trending, you have to be able to put the ball in the basket. Brandon Miller's probably your best option here to do so. And I think if, when this team were to get to the playoffs at some point, there's not going to be a lot of teams that can comfortably match up with Franz, Paulo, and Brandon Miller all in one series. Now you throw in the fact that they have these mega death lineups that are giant and nobody can also match up with in terms of Bol, Wendell Carter Jr., all the other big guys that they've got there in Orlando. It's a lot of fun. They also have Jonathan Isaac, who's been playing for the Lakeland Magic a little bit. I'm guessing he's going to, be back in the rotation at some point. Maybe they would like to trade him. This gives them a ton of optionality moving forward and something I think would be a lot of fun to watch. So selfishly, I mock Brandon Miller here. Magic fans are probably saying, oh, whoa, we want a lead point guard. Sorry, Scoot, Amen Thompson already off the board. And we'll talk about Nick Smith Jr. later. There are some concerns about that knee that he has right now. Which leads us to Charlotte, and I'm sure the Hornets were hoping to see Brandon Miller available, just given how their circumstances played out. Gordon Hayward likely to be traded this season. I'm not sure if Terry Rozier is going to be in Charlotte long term. And of course, Miles Bridges currently not in Charlotte after the tough offseason that he had. Deservedly, he deserved to have a tough offseason. I just want to be clear on that. Number 5, Charlotte here. They go with another wing to give them kind of that physical, strong, forward type in Cam Whitmore, who at points this year I thought he was going to be the guy that just kind of jumps up into that top 4. I thought naturally he could maybe become the 4th prospect on the board. Brandon Miller's really the guy that's ascended to that level. Whitmore's had performances that make him look that way, but he's also had some interesting play at times where he maybe doesn't live up to what he did this past summer for USA Basketball. I think he's going to be a really awesome player in the NBA, though. I think he's the perfect fit next to LaMelo Ball. And of course, you say, well, yeah, athletic wing. Of course, we've already seen that. I'm more so talking about the physicality. He's able to, play on a straight line drive. He's able to bump guys off of him. He's very strong, very crafty around the rim using that strength. So I think that there's a lot of positives here for Charlotte. A guy currently playing in the Big East, stays out east with the Charlotte Hornets, and he's going to love playing in North Carolina with LaMelo Ball. Pick number 6 now, the Washington Wizards here. And Washington, I try to keep these videos mostly positive. The Wizards are a huge head scratcher at this point. Tommy Shepard, that scouting department, typically has not been super successful in recent drafts. You look at their recent draft history, 2015 Jerian Grant, likes of Corey Kispert. Denny Avdia, I think, does have a future in this league. I just don't know if Washington's where it is. Rui Hachimura likely will not be back in Washington past the trade deadline. And if he is there past the trade deadline, I'd be surprised if he's there next year. Kuzma might not be back next year. This team's kind of just all over the place, and I don't really know what to think about them other than the fact that they're just not that good. So we're gonna do something that Tommy Shepard typically doesn't do, and draft off of upside. Now, Tommy Shepard loves to draft proven players who don't have a ton of upside. Think Rui Hachimura at Gonzaga. Think Corey Kispert at Gonzaga. Feels like he's almost going to draft Drew Timme here. Just kidding. But Ausar Thompson, overtime elite, you might be saying, well, we already saw this guy in this draft. I'm not talking about Amen. I'm talking about Ausar here. They are identical. They look, exactly the same, which makes the graphics really fun here because I never even really for sure know who I'm putting on. I am very certain this is Ausar Thompson, though. I got it from his overtime elite bio. So I do know that this is him as long as overtime elite didn't make a mistake. But 6th overall, you're looking at a guy who could become a really good point of attack defender, highly athletic. Now, I did have a really great question from a commenter on my last NBA mock draft where I had Ausar Thompson a little bit lower than 6th, and they wanted to know why I wasn't as much of a believer in Ausar compared to Amen Thompson, specifically with the notion that, hey, maybe Ausar Thompson's not getting the opportunity that his brother Amen Thompson's getting in terms of running the show for one of those overtime elite teams. And my response to that was, there's a reason why he's not getting that opportunity. As someone who I'm a basketball coach myself, practice time is really where you get to see what the players are capable of, and you get to know a player's skill sets even when they're not doing something in a game. You know what they're capable of, and then as a coach, it's your job to implement that into them actually using those skill sets in a game. The fact that Ausar Thompson's not showing those skill sets in a game makes me believe that he's just not as gifted as Amen Thompson in some of those areas, like being a lead ball handler, a playmaker, a floor general, decision maker. Because of that, his draft stock is naturally lower, but he's still a very intriguing prospect with the athleticism, length, size, defensive upside that we've seen from him. Somebody who I think is going to stick around in this top 10 for a long time, and I think 6 here for Washington would be the right pick for them, and something different than what they've done the last 5 to 7 years, especially in the Tommy Shepard era. Pick number 7 now, we get onto the Toronto Raptors, and Toronto, they've had a really disappointing season up to this point. I don't think there's any denying that. Possible we see Gary Trent Jr. traded. It's possible Fred VanVleet could get traded. OG Anunoby, I'd be surprised if he were to be dealt, but I'm not saying it's impossible. I do not think Siakam will get traded, and I know for sure Scotty Barnes will not be traded. But this Raptors team, a team with a lot of expectations coming in, just quite frankly hasn't lived up to them. But luckily, help is on the way. Keontae George from Baylor, a player who, 3 weeks ago, kind of shaky results up until that point where we weren't really sure what we're getting, and then he's turned into a flamethrower in his last 5 games, averaging right around 27 to 28 points a game in his last 5. In that stretch, Baylor's 3-2. Their 2 losses were by 2 points and 1 point, and now they're on a 3-game win streak. He's been playing really, really great basketball. For Baylor, it's kind of a loaded backcourt there, but I think he's really starting to cement himself as the number 1 guy there. Of course, he's the youngest guy in that room as well, which is why Scott Drew was a little hesitant to, feed him the ball a ton. And we've seen Baylor kind of stylistically change their offense a little bit as the season's progressed, kind of trusting Keontae George a little bit more. And because of that, he's been paying them off with big-time numbers, big-time games, and it's been producing some winning as well. So it's definitely been a good sign for Baylor. It's been a good sign for Keontae George's draft stock. And it's going to be a great sign for Toronto because I do not think VanVleet's going to be a Raptor next season, unfortunately. So because of that, they have a huge need at point guard, specifically someone who can create a shot off of a live dribble. That's what Keontae George gives you. This is a perfect pairing. George goes into a situation with a ton of good length, solid defenders around him, and he gets to be the guy pretty much immediately in terms of knocking down big-time shots, and I think he's going to do that for Toronto playing next to Siakam. Pick number 8, the New Orleans Pelicans here now at this spot, and this pick is from the Los Angeles Lakers. Of course, could have been a disaster if the Lakers pick were to win the lottery because they do have a swap option this year. So the Pelicans theoretically could be picking in the top 4 this season, but at number 8, where they currently land from this lottery simulation, Nick Smith Jr. is the selection. And I know Pelicans fans are going to be telling me, whoa, we don't need a point guard. We drafted Dyson Daniels. To me, Dyson Daniels is kind of more of like a hybrid wing guard anyway, where he's not going to be your primary number 1 ball handler all the time. And you're going to say, well, we have CJ McCollum for that. Completely agree. If you go down this whole entire roster, there's not really needs. That's why the New Orleans Pelicans are a really good team. Don't need a forward. You've got Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram. You've got all these guys, Najee Marshall, who's one of the most underrated players in the league, Trey Murphy, who's really ascended into being a really good player this season. Big man, you have Jonas Valanciunas, Larry Nance. You also have Jackson Hayes, who sometimes barely plays. It's kind of crazy. That's how deep they are. And then, across the board at guard, they've got, guys like Devontae Graham as well, who had a half-court shot the day I'm recording this. They're set. They don't need anything. This is where you take the swing on upside, though. Last year, 8th overall, they pulled the trigger on Dyson Daniels. This is best-case scenario for New Orleans. They get Nick Smith Jr. from Arkansas. He's a very talented ball handler who's been, struggling with a little bit of a knee issue. Because of that, he missed the start of the season for Arkansas. Came back, played really, really well when he was on the court, and then is missing a little bit more time. Because of that, it's possible we see his draft stock fall from a guy who a lot of people expected was a surefire top 5 pick, now down to number 8. It's possible we could see him maybe slide a little bit further even. But I think New Orleans, if they're smart here, which they have been the last 2 drafts, they've completely nailed. David Griffin, at one point I thought maybe could lose his job. If you asked me 24 months ago, now at this spot, it seems like he's got long-term, for sure, job security. He's done a really great job turning the ship around, and Nick Smith Jr. would just be some more icing on the cake. Pick number 9, the Portland Trailblazers now at this pick. For them, started the year, they played great basketball, and now they have a big question ahead of themselves. Jeremy Grant, his extension, they need to get something done with him by March 1st, otherwise he becomes an unrestricted free agent. Is it possible Portland already pivots on the Jeremy Grant trade and then look to retrade him? I would not completely rule that out, but 9th overall, with Mike Schmitz in the building, one thing's clear. They're going to draft based off of potential, and they're going to really heavily favor youth. Last year, I pinpointed Shaedon Sharpe as the selection for them. I have a video up on the channel with a draft guide on the Portland Trailblazers, and in that video, I said I would be surprised if they don't walk away from the draft with Shaedon Sharpe if he's available at their pick. I had very good reasoning for that. They drafted him 7th overall. They absolutely love the kid. 9th overall, I'm going to say it again here. If GG Jackson is on the board for them, I would be shocked if Portland does not draft GG Jackson. He is one of the youngest players in this draft. He was the number 1 prospect for next year's draft class before reclassifying to this year to play for South Carolina. And, his efficiency has been a little up and down. He's a little reliant on the 3-point shot for someone as athletic as he is and as, strong physical as he is, even for his younger age. You would think this kid would live in the lane a little bit more. He does time to time, but he's somebody who he likes to take those outside shots. I think it's long-term good for his development, but right now it's not producing the best efficiency. Because of that, probably he's not going to get talked about as a top 5, top 7 pick, but Portland doesn't care. Portland would love to add another athletic forward. If realistically, at some point, if they look at Shaedon Sharpe as their long-term starting small forward or maybe shooting guard with GG Jackson as their long-term starting power forward, Portland goes from this team that maybe isn't super athletic all the time to 2 of the most athletic players in the league and guys that can really jump out of the gym, provide that burst of energy, athleticism, and to be honest, good skill sets as well, which is really what makes them an interesting pairing there in Portland. Pick 10, we're back to Orlando now with this pick that comes from the Chicago Bulls. And with this selection, I think there's a few things that Orlando could really consider. Remember, we went with Brandon Miller, 4th overall. Definitely a fun selection. But now it's time to figure out the guard spot. And last mock, I went with 2 guards. Magic fans didn't like it. And I understand why. People look at Cole Anthony, Markelle Fultz as long-term parts of the franchise. I don't really believe that as much. Specifically on Cole Anthony. Jalen Suggs, I liked him coming out of Gonzaga, although I did not like him as much as everybody else. For most people, he was a consensus top 4 on their big boards. He did not make the top 4 on mine in that draft, and I feel very good about that. Now, I think he's underwhelmed me even to this point, though, of his career. We're going to go with Cason Wallace out of Kentucky. I just think you need to add another guard option, and the one thing I really like about this for Orlando, earlier with pick number 4, we talked about some of the offensive upside of drafting a guy like Brandon Miller, putting him next to Banchero and Wagner. You draft a guy like Cason Wallace, who I think a lot of people are going to compare him to Marcus Smart. I don't quite see the same comparison. To be honest, I see a little bit more Mikal Bridges in Casey Wallace up to this point. And that's a positive here. Marcus Smart is the type of defensive player who he's going to do a lot of the stuff right on the ball. And when he's off the ball, he's going to set himself up for charges. And he gets a good amount of those calls. Casey Wallace is going to be a defensive playmaker in the gaps like Mikal Bridges. Now, Bridges is also an extremely good on-ball defender. I don't see that quite as much for Casey Wallace, although I think he can grow in that. You look at his wingspan, the defensive upside's for sure there. The one thing that's been really notable, though, for him at Kentucky, some of his big defensive games include, 7 steals and multiple defensive plays where he jumps in, grabs a jump ball. It seems like he's all over the place with his length. He's got really good instincts, and that's what reminds me of Mikal Bridges. Think about how many times we see someone drive, then try kicking out on the baseline to a corner shooter, and Mikal Bridges just seemingly appears out of nowhere to snag the ball out of the air. I think Casey Wallace is going to do a lot of that at the NBA level, which is what makes him a really intriguing pairing into Orlando with already some good forward play. We added Brandon Miller in offensively. They still have that, multitude of big men that we talked about earlier. Yeah, Casey Wallace, and you've got a ton of depth at pretty much every single spot in terms of guard, wing, big. That's kind of the perfect scenario right now for Orlando. Pick number 11, the Oklahoma City Thunder on the board here now. And one thing's been really clear about this team for me, and I've been saying it now for about 2 years. This team is looking to draft size for position, and they're looking to draft playmaking. They want players who can do stuff off of a live dribble. They want players who can see the next pass, that can move the ball. They want to build an entire team unit. That's been the entire identity of this rebuild since trading Paul George. We want players who know how to make the right play and are skilled enough to make the needed play when necessary. And to be honest, they're on a really great start. This team's been really good this year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a top 5 player in the Western Conference this season. He's a top 10 player in the world right now. Should be an all-star starter. Should be an all-NBA selection for sure, as long as his play doesn't completely fall off, which I would be surprised if it did. This team's in a really, really strong spot, and SGA is really at the main heart and focus of that, but Josh Giddey's a really nice player. I think Jalen Williams from Santa Clara was a good pick for them last year. I think Jalen Williams from Arkansas was also a good pick for them. I think that even though his plus-minus ratings this year don't look as great as I think they could, he's still a nice piece. And Chet Holmgren, he's going to really be the linchpin for this team, but they're going to get another sizable playmaker who can make the right play but score when he has to type guy in Jet Howard from Michigan. Now, a lot of Jet Howard's success comes from a lot of the Zoom series offense that they run at Michigan. Dribble handoffs are Jet Howard's best friend. That's how he kind of takes advantage and gets downhill. Because of that, I slept on Franz Wagner a little bit when it was his draft cycle, and I thought, look, it seems like schematically he's getting kind of more open looks than a lot of other players, and I kind of doubted his athleticism a little bit. Right now in the back of my head, I find myself saying some of those same things about Jet Howard, but this time I'm not going to just completely fall for that and believe it. I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I'm going to trust that Jet Howard is actually good and that there's a reason that Michigan's running some of these sets for him, and there's a reason that they're working. And I think this is a perfect fit for Oklahoma City. Realistically, the long-term lineup for them is going to be Josh Giddey, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams from Santa Clara, the wing, and Lou Dort plus Chet Holmgren. That's going to be the long-term starting 5. I'd be surprised if it isn't. But then Jet Howard gives you a little bit of bench flair, and a guy who I think could really be successful on this team as well. Pick 12, the Indiana Pacers here now at this pick. They're in the lottery, finally. This team is the team that we thought was going to be a lottery team. Tyrese Halliburton's played great. Buddy Hield's been awesome for them as well. Miles Turner's played really, really well. They're on a kind of a recent skid, though, in the Eastern Conference, and because of that, they find themselves in that lottery. And it's really possible that Miles Turner could depart from this team in free agency. I'm going to have a video coming out on the channel within the next couple days covering Miles Turner contract extension details, what those conversations look like, and why he maybe hasn't extended with Indiana yet, but he still possibly could. Right now, I'm going to kind of buy into the fact that maybe, just maybe, he will. They do have 3 first-round picks this year, though. And Anthony Black's the guy I want to target with the first one. A player who I think his draft range could really vary from anywhere around, maybe pick 7, pick 6, all the way down to about 12 or 13. He's a 6'7" guard, and you already are probably saying, whoa, 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 why is he going this low if he's a 6'7" guard? There are some things that he does really great. One of those things is playmaking. He's a very smart passer. He plays with his head up as a live dribble guy. You guys are probably saying, well, this guy said live dribble a bunch of times already. The reason I have is because it's one of the most important things when you're evaluating a prospect, and Anthony Black's great at it. That's why he's going to be higher on my big board than a lot of other people, because Anthony Black sees the next play. And he's somebody who not only does he see it, he has the size and the passing ability to make the next play. And because of that, I really, really like him. I think he's going to be a nice defensive playmaker. He's got incredible wingspan, and he knows how to use it. He's going to get in passing lanes. He's going to be disruptive on the ball as well. He knows how to well-time his reaches. He's got a very good understanding of the guy he's defending and the cues that he has in terms of whether he's going to go crossover, hezzy, and he plays really well off of that. I think Indiana's getting a steal here. I really do. Now, the question marks are, does he sustain the three-point shooting? This year, he's been pretty good at it. But at the same time, he hasn't had to play off of Nick Smith Jr. a ton. When Nick Smith Jr. has been in, Anthony Black's numbers have gone down slightly. So I think it's possible that he stays kind of around this 12, maybe 10 to 12 spot. But really, if I was drafting, he probably would have been off the board by now, at least a few picks earlier, if I was one of these teams, because I really, really like him. For example, if I was Portland, I probably would have pulled the trigger on him, even though guard's not necessarily a big need for them. I would just say, hey, look, I want to get the player who I believe is one of the best players available. Anthony Black, for me, is that guy. I think Indiana is getting a steal here. You put him at the 2, Mathurin at the 3, and you're cooking with fire. I would really, really love, the positional flexibility, the size, the playmaking that Indiana would have to offer after drafting Black. Pick 13 now, the Phoenix Suns here on the board. And with this pick, the Suns are kind of in a weird spot. They did get a win the day I'm recording this. They beat the Grizzlies 112-110. Mikal Bridges had 24 points. Chris Paul actually had a pretty good game as well. Something I'm glad to say. He has not been playing great this year when he's been on the court. But this is an upside swing for them. Guy who was the National Player of the Year at the high school level last year for Montverde. That is, of course, Dariq Whitehead. Playing at Duke this year. Did not begin the season with them, actually missed a little bit of time, and then once he came back, he struggled a little bit. You could tell he was kind of out of rhythm. That shot, though, has started to come back a little bit. He's been playing much better and has played as somebody who I think is very well deserving of a lottery selection. When you look at Dariq Whitehead, the shot making is the most evident thing. He understands how to play balanced. This year he's only shooting 37% from the field. He's actually shooting 35% from 3, and he's only getting to the line 1 time a game, but he is making 93% of his free throws. So there's a lot of people out there that believe free throws are the greatest indicator of shooting success at the next level. I don't necessarily fully believe that, but when you actually watch this guy, his shot mechanics, his ability to get a shot off, I think there's a lot to work with here. And I think realistically, Phoenix really needs a guard to replace Chris Paul. I think Chris Paul is kind of on his last legs. Now, I've said that before, and it's come back to bite me a little bit. He's been awesome since the first time I said it, but this time, he's a few years older. The injuries have really caught up to him, I think, and I think guard is the bigger need, but Dariq Whitehead's the biggest talent, and because of that, they have to take him. I know it's not necessarily the biggest need. They do have Bridges. They have Cam Johnson, who's going to be a restricted free agent this offseason. I'd be shocked if he's playing for any team but Phoenix next year. But still, for depth purposes, for talent purposes, Dariq Whitehead should be the pick 10 out of 10 times here for Phoenix. Pick 14 now, the Utah Jazz on the clock. Shout out to that highlighter yellow. It's painful to look at for me. But the Jazz, they've been playing really well this season. Now, a little bit as of late, they've kind of dropped down in the standings a little bit, find themselves in the lottery. But it doesn't seem like they're ever going to get into that Victor Wembanyama territory unless they get really, really lucky on draft night. Because of that, they're just going to draft a really good, strong forward here in Jarris Walker out of Houston. Played his high school basketball at IMG Academy. That team was really, really good. that he played on in high school. They were a very dominant program. Everyone knows how good IMG Academy is. Seemingly produce every 7'6" kid in the United States. Seemingly produce every 5-star guard, every 5-star forward. Seemingly plays either there or Montverde Academy. It's almost without fail. But Jarace Walker, he's a very intriguing prospect. He's got a really good mid-range game. He's very confident in that mid-range area. He does shoot the 3-ball a little bit as well. But I think the biggest thing when you look at him, he's got the physical frame that a lot of teams are looking for to play power forward in the NBA. He's got the perimeter skill set. He's got the ability to put the ball on the deck a little bit. Now, I don't think it's been super flawless this year. When you look at Jarace Walker, now he is on the number 1 team in the nation. Houston's been really good, but he is shooting about 36% from 3. Not terrible. Just under 2 attempts a game. And he's also somebody who shooting 48% from the field in 24.5 minutes. It's not like he's been a 30-minute-a-game guy for them. It's not like he's been leading the team in scoring, but he's been still very, very good. And I think Utah here, even though they have Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler, you might be saying, whoa, well, front court's not the biggest need for this team. They probably want to find some long-term guards, just given the fact that Jordan Clarkson's up for free agency, could potentially explore leaving Utah, although I'm not certain he will. They also do have Colin Sexton. So you might say, well, what's really the need here for Utah? It depends on what they do trade out. If they look at moving off of a guy like Mike Conley, or if they move off of Jordan Clarkson, or if they move off of Colin Sexton, then that's really what would open up a guard need. But here, I think just go best player available in the lottery, take a good player, and build your team off of that. Outside of the lottery now, we're at pick number 15 with the LA Clippers, and Terquavion Smith is the home run selection here for them. He did sustain somewhat of a seemingly serious injury. He did tweet out that he's going to be okay, but obviously prayers up for Terquavion Smith. At the time I'm recording this, don't have all the clarity on what that is. By the time that maybe this is up on YouTube, maybe you guys will know, and I would love for you to inform me down in the comment section. But I think Terquavion Smith would be a great fit here for the Clippers. He gives you a ton of that scoring punch. He's somebody who he's never been afraid of taking a shot. And not that the Clippers necessarily need a ton more, punch on offense, but I think they need someone who understands how to get himself downhill, get to a spot to score. I think it could be beneficial for him, and they badly need someone who's capable of being the long-term point guard. John Wall isn't it. Reggie Jackson isn't it. They're trying Terrence Mann there. I just don't know if I love any of those options. I do think Terrence Mann's a good player. I just don't necessarily think he's a great point guard in this league. I think Terquavion Smith could be somebody who fleshes out a long-term role, being either a long-term bench scorer, which is still beneficial for a team drafting outside the lottery, or maybe being like a 5th starter type at the point guard position. Pick number 16, the Atlanta Hawks here now with this pick, and they're going to look at a guy named Grady Dick from Kansas. And I was going to make a joke. I'm not going to be a professional here. But Atlanta, after trading Kevin Huerter, they clearly need more shooting, and they've really missed him a lot more than I thought they would. I think Grady Dick would be a great supplement for them, and would be a really, really good addition into that team where, with DeJounte Murray, Trae Young, you'd think, okay, they have enough offense. Do they have enough, to go around those two guys? And surprisingly, the offense has been a little bit more shaky this year. Part of that's because Trae Young hasn't shot the ball at an elite level like we're used to seeing. But I think Grady Dick being a little bit more of a gravity shooter, he's going to draw guys toward him. You can't just leave him out on the perimeter. I think that'll open up some things for Atlanta for sure, and would be a really nice selection at pick 16. He's had some big games this year for Kansas. Pick 17, Utah back on the clock again with that neon yellow. And this pick comes from the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have figured some things out in recent weeks. They've started to win a little bit more and more and more. But Utah here at this pick, and this is where it gets really controversial, Amani Bates from Eastern Michigan. I know a lot of people are going to say, whoa, this other mock I looked at said he was a second-round pick. Whoa. People are saying maybe undrafted. You have him at pick 17. Whoa, what's going on? Hear me out. I understand his freshman season at Memphis was brutal, to the point where Penny Hardaway could not play him. Offensively, he struggled getting to his spots. He struggled converting when he got to his spots. All around, it was brutally bad. No lies about it. He was not good at all as a freshman. But please remember, he reclassified He was one of the youngest freshmen in the nation, essentially playing college basketball, and he struggled a little bit. Do you think that scouts and GMs and executives should say, oh, no, bad freshman year, we're done with him. No way we consider him, especially when his sophomore season, after transferring to a place he's a little bit more comfortable, better indication of what his role is supposed to be on this team, he's been balling. And if you look at some of the efficiency numbers as an isolation scorer, his efficiency numbers as a pull-up shooter, they're in the same territory as a guy named Brandon Miller, who we saw go 4th overall. Now, you might say, oh, whoa, well, these analytics, whatever, I don't care about those. Put on the film. Watch him with your eyes. Watch full games of him and tell me that you don't think he's potentially one of the 5 to 7 most talented players in this draft. He's extremely quick. He's got an incredible first step. His burst is incredible as well. He's fairly athletic vertically. Now, he's very thin and slight, which is why he's not a lottery pick for me here. I think his body's going to take a little bit of a time adjusting to the NBA. But the skill set, the speed, the ball handling is all there for a hybrid dominant wing. And yes, I said dominant. I think he's somebody who could be averaging 20-plus points a game in the NBA at some point. If I'm Utah, I have 3 first-round picks. There is no way that I am stepping out of this draft without Emoni Bates, especially if teams aren't going to draft him in the lottery. I just don't think I would have the guts to not take him. I don't care where people are mocking him. For what you guys know, I go off of my own big board. I go off of my own analysis. I do not look at what other people are saying. I don't care what other people are saying, because every year there's risers and fallers. Those aren't real things. Those are just words that we use to compare to where people originally expected. Emoni Bates, later in the year, if he tests really well and has some great one-on-one workouts, will get labeled as a riser by all the people who are mocking him in the 40s and 50s right now. I'm mocking him at 17. That's where I think he belongs. Let me know in the comment section down below if you think I got it right. Pick 18, the Golden State Warriors here now. They drafted Patrick Baldwin Jr. last year. They've struggled a little bit this year. And part of the reason why is they keep drafting a bunch of guys that necessarily aren't winning players. You look at Jonathan Kuminga when he played with G League Ignite, they didn't win a ton. You look at James Wiseman with Memphis, he played 3 college games. Moses Moody did win a good amount at Arkansas, but he hasn't been playing a ton for them. Patrick Baldwin Jr. wasn't good at Milwaukee. And to go with that, they're going to draft another guy who doesn't win in college, but has some of those flashy attributes. Maxwell Lewis from Pepperdine. I was actually watching the Waves the other night, a full game against Portland, and they lost. In conference, this team is terrible. They do not win in conference at all. Pepperdine is not a good college team by any sense of the imagination, but you do watch them, and Maxwell Lewis makes some plays that you say, wow, okay, there might be some talent here. And if you think that Emoni Bates should go below Maxwell Lewis, you're just wrong. I couldn't be, it's just not right. But with Maxwell Lewis here, there are some traits to like. There are some, redeeming factors about his game. He has a pretty solid handle. He likes to shoot off the move, but he's also someone who I think could project to be a good spot-up shooter in the NBA. And he's not afraid of attacking the rim. He's a pretty good athlete. Defensively, he looks lost half the time, but that's kind of what the MO has been for Golden State, drafting guys in the first round. Guys that they say, hey, look, it's going to take a little bit of time to develop these guys, but while we have Steph, while we have Draymond, while we have Clay, let's go ahead, take some risks on these players, give them some time to develop, and hopefully by the time that our veterans are past their prime, we'll have a whole new group of young guys who are ready to rock and roll, and they're going to index on that here and take another guy who's kind of that same cloth. Pick 19, the New York Knicks here now. They actually have 2 picks in a row. This is their own selection, and with it, they're going to draft Chris Murray from Iowa, a player who last year no one was even considering as a first-round level prospect at any point. But he plays very similarly to his brother Keegan. Now, a little bit less off of isolation than Keegan played at Iowa, and a little bit more out of, natural actions at the college level, whether that's, pick and roll actions as a, roller or somebody who catches around the rim and just is ready to go up. But he's been really productive. There's no denying that. He's had some monster games this year for the Iowa Hawkeyes, and his efficiency has been very impressive. This is his 3rd year in college basketball, so you would expect him to take some of those steps forward. Last year, he only started 1 game, This year, he started all 15. He's shooting 62% on 2-pointers at the time I'm recording this and 37.6% on threes. So you're looking at a player who, on very good volume, has been very successful both inside the arc and out. And I think for the Knicks, yes, they don't need another power forward, but realistically, they'll likely trade these picks anyways. I think that what the Knicks have been doing has been very smart, trading out their selections for more and more future assets so that when a star that they really want to go in on becomes available, they have the draft picks to go get him. I think it's been smart, especially given the fact that this team is still deep. They have a lot of nice young talent. There's not enough minutes, honestly, for the players on this team for the most part. And I think as long as they stay in asset acquisition mode, they're doing the right thing. But if they do keep this pick, Chris Murray would be a really nice add to their roster. And it gives you some flexibility if a trade around, say, Obi Toppin does come up at some point. Pick number 20, the New York Knicks again. And with this pick, they're going to go with Bryce Sensabaugh from Ohio State. And Knicks fans are going to tell me, well, we don't need those two positions. I get it. Like I said, you guys are very deep. You don't necessarily need a lot of things. It's kind of like what we talked about with New Orleans. Although I think New Orleans has, better top-end players, I think the Knicks right now have a lot of really good, solid players, and Jalen Brunson's been balling out for you guys too. It's been awesome to see, for sure. Now, I think Sensabaugh is a pretty sensible pick here in terms of his ability to get a bucket in the mid-range area. I think he's going to be somebody who, in playoff basketball, would find success. Just naturally, defenses don't allow a lot of three-pointers and a lot of shots at the rim. Sensabaugh lives in that middle area where it's really difficult to defend, and in isolation, it's really easy to get to those spots and still play one-on-one basketball. That's where he's going to find success at the NBA level. Now, the question is he efficient enough to do that consistently and be a focal point of an offense? And if not, that's where his role kind of comes into question for me at the NBA level. But I still think there's a lot of talent to work with here on somebody who's going to get first-round looks for sure, similar to Malachi Branham, also from Ohio State last year. Pick 21, the Miami Heat on the clock now. And this team's gotten some really good minutes from guys like Caleb Martin, Haywood Highsmith. So a lot of credit to not only those two players, but also Eric Spoelstra for getting the most out of his guys. But I think a really fun option for them would be Noah Clowney, somebody who's flown a little bit more under the radar despite a ton of success this year. He's been a little bit of a double-double machine for the Crimson Tide, playing next to Brandon Miller. He does a lot of the dirty work. And perhaps it's Udonis Haslam's last year with Miami. I think Noah Clowney's kind of cut of the same cloth of being, a guy who's going to bring his lunch pail and boots to work, and he's going to put in a hard day of work. I think that Clowney would be a really nice fit into Heat culture. I think positionally he makes sense as somebody who can hit the glass, knows how to finish around the rim. I looked for a point guard here. I considered Jalen Hood-Schifino, but I think that's just a little bit too early for that at this spot of the mock. So Noah Clowney was what I landed on for the Heat. Pick 22, the Los Angeles Lakers here now. This is the swap worst rights from the Pelicans. So 22, the Lakers, it's not going to solve all of their needs, but I think this is a really good option for them. Khalil Ware from Oregon, his minutes have actually been diminishing as the year has gone on. He, of course, started the year as a sixth-man option for the Oregon Ducks and was extremely productive in those minutes. That production has fallen off a little bit, but you're still looking at a big man who is capable of stepping outside the three-point line, willing to shoot the three ball. Now, his success rate's been a little shaky this year as well, but still someone who you would project to be able to do that at some point of his NBA career. He's also a pretty good rebounder. Now, he's very skinny. He definitely needs to build on some muscle, and even some fat would honestly help him as well at the next level in terms of being able to bang inside with some of the big guys. But the Lakers here with Thomas Bryant on an expiring contract, they might be running themselves into a similar situation they did with Malik Monk a year ago, where one of those guys on a minimum plays way better than they're expecting, and since they're only signed to 1 year, you run the risk of losing them the next year in free agency. So I think that's a very real possibility with Thomas Bryant this offseason, making Khalil Ware a bigger need than it currently, I would think, seem for Lakers fans. Pick 23, the Sacramento Kings here now. Light the beam. This team's been great. The beam team's been winning and winning and winning. Kevin Huerter's little dribble handoff game with Domantas Sabonis has been one of my favorite things to watch. De'Aaron Fox probably should be considered the leader in terms of the Clutch Player of the Year award that is brand new to the NBA this year. The Kings have been awesome. A lot of credit to them. Monty McNair has kind of steered the ship in a very interesting way, a way that has gotten a lot of criticism on Sacramento. But at the end of the day, when you're winning, you're winning. And that's really all that matters. To add to this, they're going to look at forward Baba Miller from Florida State, who is lengthy, somebody who projects as maybe being a decent deep range shooter in his career. At 6'11", he's got an incredible wingspan. He's going to be disruptive defensively, both vertically and out on the perimeter as well in passing lanes. Now, we haven't gotten to see a ton of him. There was a little bit of an issue with the NCAA in terms of getting his season started on time. Florida State's also really just not good this year, which is something very rare to see from a Leonard Hamilton team. But that's kind of the reality right now. We have him going from one coast to the other, from Florida to Sacramento. But I think that ultimately he's somebody who, the combine's going to be really important for him. He's going to showcase his length, size, some of the versatility teams are looking for, especially at the forward spot for Sacramento right now, who could potentially lose Harrison Barnes this offseason. I think Baba Miller's a no doubt surefire, yes, we want to keep this guy around long term. 24, the Indiana Pacers here now. This pick comes from the Cleveland Cavaliers. And with their second pick here in the first round, I have them going with Kyle Filipowski from Duke, who has really flashed a lot of intriguing and impressive skills this year for the Duke Blue Devils. One of those being his ability to handle the ball, play make for others, and that was no surprise to me. He was somebody who I thought could kind of hover around this top 20 area for quite some time because of some of the stuff he presents offensively. Willing to shoot perimeter shots. He's willing to handle the ball, put it on the deck, get to the rim. Can play make for others to a certain extent for a big man. Of course, we're all talking relatively here. Can he be your point guard? Definitely not. I think people defensively, when a guy's really good defensively, a lot of people love to, use the misnomer. He can guard 1 through 5. When a guy can dribble and pass, a lot of people think, oh, whoa, he's like a point center. That's not a thing, right? That's not what Filipowski is. But he can do some of the things, say, Al Horford's done in his career, which is really impressive. And that's a really, really great selection. 24th overall. I'm not talking about probably the type of Al Horford that Atlanta had. I'm talking more about the Al Horford that, Boston's had in terms of being a connecting piece. That's what I see here. But Filipowski's also impressed me a little bit with some of his ability to defend on the perimeter. You think a near 7-footer, good length, that he's going to be more of an interior defensive big. Well, he's rather slight, but because of that, he's actually pretty quick on his feet. He knows how to flip his hips well, stay in front of guys. I think he's an impressive prospect here for Indiana to land and kind of fill out their forward room a little bit more after going with Anthony Black at 12. Pick 25, the Brooklyn Nets here now. This team badly needs more big men. And it's an okay option here. Derek Lively, he was somebody who a lot of people expected to be a lottery selection. Missed the beginning part of the season with Duke. Just hasn't really played great basketball this year. Honestly, he has not lived up to some of the hype that his high school tape really was impressive to me. I thought he was somebody who was going to have a really, really great rookie season or freshman season, And in turn, he's playing 16 minutes a game and averaging 4 points, 4 rebounds. So you might be saying, well, what are you really seeing in this guy? Well, he's shooting about 60% on 2-pointers. So he's been efficient in that realm. And in those 16 minutes, this is where the impressiveness really stands out to me. 16 minutes, he's averaging 1.9 blocks a game, which if you're looking at a per 40, he's averaging nearly 5 blocks per 40 minutes. So Brooklyn, who has already gotten a big step forward from Nick Claxton this year, who I love, by the way. I love Nick Claxton. I loved him last year. I thought he was going to be a breakout candidate this year. He is. He's somebody who could maybe get an all-defense selection. I think that they need somebody who can play 20 minutes behind him. Derek Lively's the perfect guy for this. Goes in the game, you say, hey, go try and block shots, go disrupt stuff around the rim. That's what he's going to do. He's doing it already at the college level, and I think he's going to be able to do it at the NBA level as well. 26, Houston Rockets here now. Of course, they went with Amen Thompson, 3rd overall in this mock earlier. And this pick comes from the Milwaukee Bucks in a deal. And Arthur Kaluma is the player I landed on. This is going to be a little interesting to Rockets fans who are going to say, whoa, well, we have, at this point, Jabari Smith on the wing a little bit. We've got Kenyon Martin Jr. We've got Jayshawn Tate. Is forward really what we need? Some could argue for maybe a backup center. Like, yes and no, with two centers just going off the board in Filipowski and Derek Lively, two Duke centers back to back. I think for Houston here, you go with a player who's maybe just a little bit older than either of those two. Kaluma, who, yes, he's only a sophomore, but that is one more year of maturity, which I think is important for this team, important for this locker room. And he's also somebody who's been around winning in his time with Creighton, and he's also somebody who's willing to do the dirty work. I think he's got a very intriguing skill set. He can handle the ball a little bit for his position. He's stepped up big time last year when Ryan Kalkbrenner was out for March Madness, but he's also willing to step in and take a charge. He's willing to, put his body on the line for the team. He's willing to sit down in a stance for 30 seconds and defend for an entire possession. That's what Houston needs more of right now, and I think Arthur Kaluma would be a really nice addition to the locker room and on the actual hardwood. Pick 27, Utah back for the third time. If you're not blinded by now from this neon yellow, I don't know what's going on, but clearly the Jazz jerseys aren't working well enough. It's just a joke, Jazz fans. Don't get too serious about it. But with this pick from the 76ers, I have them going with New Zealand Breakers forward Ryan Rupert, who is a very intriguing, dynamic prospect right now who maybe isn't living up to some of the hype that he potentially received as, somebody who got labeled as a French star going into the NBL as a next star. Obviously, that's the name of the prospect pool that they look to pull from, where they, say, well, this is our next star when they talk about a guy who would be NBA draft eligible. Ryan Rupert is a guy that I could see Utah looking at. Now, with the way that I've had them draft here, they've gone with 3 forwards. It's not necessarily ideal, but Amani Bates can handle the ball. Ryan Rupert can handle the ball to a little bit of an extent, and he's somebody who he's best when he's attacking downhill. I think that he's very raw yet at this point. There's a lot of development that has to happen, but he's got an incredibly long wingspan. He's athletic. He's dynamic downhill. There's a lot to like on film, but there's also a lot to critique, which I think is why Utah, a very patient team, a team right now that has their eyes set on long-term building something really good. I think Utah's a really good landing spot for him here. 28, the Memphis Grizzlies now with this pick. Very likely this pick gets traded at the trade deadline for more immediate help in order to help them come postseason time, maybe win an extra series, perhaps push them into the NBA Finals. I would be shocked if Memphis doesn't at least sniff around trading this first-round pick to get an upgrade at the trade deadline. But assuming they don't, Leonard Miller's the guy I like for them. One thing, with how good this team still is, it feels hard to critique them, but losing Kyle Anderson, I do think, even though come playoff time wasn't as big of a deal because they didn't like to play him and Steven Adams or him and Jaren Jackson together a ton, I do think a Kyle Anderson type player who can play make as a forward and functions as an offensive connector is really what they're looking for still. And Leonard Miller's, I think, a really great option for them here. For those of you who've been watching the channel for a while, you guys know I'm not the biggest Leonard Miller fan. A year ago, I said he was one of the worst prospects I've ever seen. He's looked a little bit better this year for G League Ignite. He was just not ready at all for the NBA last season. There was no way a team was going to consider drafting him at all. Now I think it's a little bit more realistic to see him as a somewhat of a first-round prospect. Anytime you get past pick number 20, there's pretty high variance here. Any guys from 21 you could realistically see maybe fall to say 41, 45-ish. Leonard Miller's a player here who I think you could argue that's true for, but the play style kind of fits what Memphis I think would be looking for at this selection. Pick 29, the Charlotte Hornets here now on the clock. This pick comes from the Denver Nuggets from a multitude of trades, but ultimately for Charlotte, I think that after going with Cam Whitmore 5th overall, they should be looking for another highly athletic forward type. Dylan Mitchell, this is one of my favorite players in the NBA draft this year, and a lot of people are going to be surprised by that. Coming into the year, a lot of people, after watching him at Montverde last year, expected this kid could be a lottery talent, right? Highly athletic, huge vertical, really fast with the ball and without the ball. He's a dynamic, elite, explosive athlete. How could he not be a lottery pick? Well, it's because his skill set doesn't play out in a way that, say, a guy like Keontae George's does, where he's not best with the ball in his hands. He's actually best without the ball. And most draft evaluators are going to look at that as a massive negative failure and some reason to not draft him super high. For me, this is ROI, return on investment. You draft him in the 20s, and you're going to get a player who plays like a lottery pick. The reason why Charlotte here has LaMelo Ball already. Let's say maybe they keep Terry Rozier, or they find another way to add another ball handler, playmaker type, right? You don't want 5 guys who dribble the basketball on your team. You need guys who are role players. And the better the role player you have, the better the team you are. Dylan Mitchell is going to be a star role player. No, I don't mean he's going to average 20 points a game. He might not even average 15. What he's going to be is a souped up version of Jared Vanderbilt. And what I mean by that, he's going to step on the court, and instead of jumping 34 inches like Jared Vanderbilt does, he's going to jump 42 inches. And he's going to be able to, throw down dunks that Jared Vanderbilt maybe can't. He's going to get to a basketball faster than Jared Vanderbilt, who's already a really good defensive player who makes a lot of timely plays and has learned how to shoot a corner 3 a little bit. I'm telling you right now, if you want to beat a 2-3 zone in the NBA, putting this guy on the baseline is going to be death to 2-3 zones. Any team that plays Miami 3 or 4 times a year should want this kid. Ironically, Charlotte in the East, they get to match up with Miami quite a bit. Dylan Mitchell is going to be a fantastic player in the NBA. And in a role that not everybody understands. You're going to watch this kid on tape, you're going to say, whoa, he doesn't dribble the ball, right? His highlights are all like catching lobs and dunking around the rim, and you're going to say, okay, is that impressive? And you might say, no. And come playoff time, does that mean he's going to score, ever 12 points in a playoff game? Maybe not. And yet I'm still enamored and in love with this kid, because if you can coach and you know how to use your players to the best of their abilities and put, together cohesive units on the court, this guy is a missing piece that there's just not many of him in the NBA. Most guys in the NBA come in as guys who had the ball in their hands for high school, college, and then in the NBA, they have to learn to play without it. In high school, he played without the ball. At Texas, he's playing without the ball. Now in Charlotte, he would play without the ball, and he would step in day one, be ready for that role, and excel in it. And that's what makes me really excited about him as a draft prospect. Number 30 now, the Indiana Pacers here again, final pick of the first round. This pick comes from the Boston Celtics in the Malcolm Brogdon trade. Celtics have been a wrecking crew this year, best record in the NBA. And the Pacers with this pick are going to look at Day'Ron Holmes from Dayton. I talked earlier about the potential of Miles Turner maybe staying in Indiana. Well, the draft happens before free agency, and if they don't get an extension done, I would bet that they'll draft some center in the first round on draft night. There's not a lot of great options at this pick, but I think Day'Ron Holmes is a pretty solid one for the Dayton Flyers. I'm actually a Dayton Flyers fan myself, and I'm not the only guy talking about him as a potential first-round option. Now, I think this is a kind of low-end, maybe not really deserving of a first-round pick, but based off of position, based off of need, he's athletic, he can fit around the rim, he's a good finisher. He kind of fits the stuff you'd be looking to put around Tyrese Halliburton, especially if Miles Turner were to depart in free agency. This is where Day'Ron Holmes makes sense. Now, if Indiana were to theoretically extend Miles Turner, it's very possible we would not see Day'Ron Holmes at this pick, and instead we would see, maybe a wing player get drafted here, or somebody they expect to maybe be a backup big, which is where maybe Day'Ron Holmes would still come into play. But for the most part, Indiana with Isaiah Jackson probably already feels good about that anyway. Indiana, I'd be surprised if they keep all 3 first-round picks anyway. This pick could potentially be on the move for another team that likes a guy and wants to get him on one of those, back-end team-friendly option contracts from the first round. So that's definitely an option as well for a trade down. But I think Day'Ron Holmes makes a lot of sense for Indiana with the option that potentially Miles Turner could be leaving Indy for the long term. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. I had a ton of fun recording this one. The mock, I'm getting better and better every time when it comes to talking about these players. The further we get into the season, the more I've gotten to see. It's just like clockwork. The longer the year goes on, the more film, the more footage you've seen, the more opportunities you've seen kids play in certain ways. So it makes it really fun to talk about. So I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. It's been a blast. Thank you all so much for watching again. Hit that like button if you did enjoy. Subscribe to the channel for more, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.